At the edge of Pine Ridge County, where gravel roads ran between pasture fences, mailbox clusters, and low concrete culverts carved into roadside ditches, a wild bobcat began stepping into the same mail carrier's path 3 mornings in a row, stopping her route in broad daylight and refusing to move until she got out of the truck. At first, everyone called it a bizarre wildlife encounter. Then they called it dangerous. But when the bobcat returned again and again to one stretch of road and kept looking toward the drainage culvert beneath the ditch bank, one rural mail carrier did what most people wouldn't. She paid attention to the pattern. What she heard next from the darkness under the road turned an ordinary mail run into a desperate rescue, and left an entire county talking about a wild animal that may have saved lives simply by refusing to be ignored. This is a story about routine, instinct, and the moment a woman trusted what she was seeing, even when it sounded impossible. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you enjoy long mystery rescue animal stories, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Every weekday at 6:40 a.m., Dana Whitaker backed her right-hand drive mail truck out of the Pine Ridge Post Annex lot with a thermos of coffee, a stack of flats sorted in delivery order, and enough muscle memory to run the first 12 miles of Route 7B without thinking. Dana was 51, broad-shouldered, weathered by wind and sun, and so consistent that people along the route checked their clocks by the sound of her tires on washboard gravel. She had been carrying rural mail for 19 years, knew every loose dog by bark, every family by mailbox repairs, and every seasonal hazard from washed-out shoulders to black ice in shaded dips. Surprises still happened on a rural route. They just usually came in the form of escaped goats, storm debris, or someone trying to mail something wrapped in duct tape. A bobcat in the road at sunrise was new. The first morning she saw it, she was easing around Miller's Bend, where County Road 14 dipped between cattails and crossed a shallow runoff ditch through a concrete culvert. Her headlights were still on, the sky barely lifting from blue-black to gray, when a shape slipped out of the grass and stood dead center in the lane. Dana hit the brake and felt the trays rattle behind her. At first, she thought coyote. Then the ears caught the light. Tufted, short tail, spotted coat. Bobcat, she muttered, gripping the wheel. It wasn't charging, wasn't crouched to spring. It just stood there staring at the truck, chest heaving in little bursts in the cold air. Dana honked once, short and firm, the way she did for deer that froze too long. The bobcat didn't move. It turned its head toward the ditch line on the right side of the road, then back to Dana. Ditch, truck, ditch again. Dana rolled down the window a few inches despite the cold. Go on now. The bobcat took 3 steps toward the shoulder, stopped at the edge of the culvert approach, looked back at her, then disappeared into the grass. Dana sat for a second, listening to the tick of the idling engine and the distant calls of red-winged blackbirds waking in the reeds. Then she drove on, because Route 7B didn't stop for strange cats, and because if she was late, she'd hear about it from half the county by lunch. By noon, she had told the story at the annex, while scanning outgoing parcels. Clerk Tanya Reed laughed so hard she had to put down a roll of stamps. Maybe it wanted junk mail. Route Supervisor Earl Benson barely looked up from a stack of forms. Bobcats are around. Don't get out of the truck. If it comes at you, call dispatch. Dana nodded because that was standard, but even then she felt the small hook of unease. It wasn't the sighting that bothered her. It was the way the animal had kept looking toward the culvert. The second morning, the bobcat was waiting in the same spot. This time Dana saw it before it stepped fully into the lane. A low shape in the frosted weeds at the right shoulder, just above the concrete culvert headwall. As her truck approached, it came out and planted itself in front of her again. Dana braked harder than she meant to. No, come on, not again. The bobcat held its ground for several seconds, then paced 3 short steps toward the ditch, stopped, and looked back at the truck. Its movement was tense, urgent, but not predatory. Dana noticed something new in the sweep of her headlights. The animal carried one hind leg a little stiffly. A dragon lift, quick but visible. Injured. She leaned across the cab and peered past the hood toward the ditch line. Cold morning mist clung low over the reeds. Water moved in the runoff channel from the week's rain, dark and slow. She heard nothing over the engine. The bobcat gave a rough, rasping call that sounded wrong coming from something so cat-like, too harsh, almost like a cough, and trotted to the culvert mouth on the right side, where the ditch dipped under the road through a corrugated concrete pipe. It stopped there, looked back once more, then vanished into the grass. Dana turned off the engine. Silence dropped hard around the truck. Wind. A distant pickup on another road. Birds. Water moving under concrete. Then, very faintly, maybe from the culvert, maybe from the reeds, something like a cry. Dana sat frozen with both hands on the steering wheel. Every rule she had ever been given about wildlife and roadside safety lining up in her head. Don't approach wild animals. Don't enter ditches alone. Don't delay the route without cause. Don't assume you heard what you think you heard at dawn in a cold wind. She waited another 10 seconds, heard nothing more, and forced herself to restart the engine. But the route felt wrong all morning. At box 318, Mrs. Givens asked why Dana looked pale. At the Miller Dairy, she nearly handed a feed invoice to the wrong brother. By the time she returned to the annex, she had made up her mind. She walked straight into Earl's office and shut the door. The bobcat was there again. Same culvert, same behavior. I think something's in that ditch. Earl took off his glasses, which he only did when a conversation was becoming his problem. Dana, if you think there's an injured animal, call animal control. I'm not sure it's an animal. That got his attention. Pine Ridge County sat in a broad patchwork of fields, creeks, and old county roads where culverts clogged, shoulders collapsed, and people still walked stretches that looked too dangerous for walking because they had no car and no other choice. Earl leaned back and studied Dana's face long enough to realize she was not bringing him a ghost story. What exactly did you hear? Dana described both mornings in detail. The blocking, the glances toward the culvert, the rasping call, the possible crying sound after she cut the engine. Earl listened with surprising patience, then reached for the county non-emergency number. I'm calling Deputy Ramirez, he said. If there's nothing there, we lose 10 minutes. If there is, I'd rather look stupid than read about it tomorrow. Deputy Joel Ramirez met Dana the next afternoon at Miller's Bend with a sheriff's SUV, a flashlight, and the expression of a man professionally committed to skepticism. He was in his early 30s, former National Guard, local enough to know Dana by route number, and practical enough not to mock a mail carrier who had noticed the same wild animal behavior twice. "Show me exactly where," he said. Dana parked on the shoulder with hazard lights flashing and walked him to the road edge, boots crunching gravel. In daylight, the ditch looked both less and more threatening than at dawn. The culvert opening was a round concrete pipe about 3 feet wide, set beneath a sloped gravel embankment lined with weeds and broken cattails. Recent runoff had left mud, drift sticks, and trash snagged along the mouth. Plastic feed bag scraps, a length of twine, 2 crushed soda cans. Nothing obvious. Ramirez crouched and shined his flashlight inside. Clear enough for water flow. No animal visible. He checked the far side opening and came back, shaking his head. No sign of a person either. Dana pointed to the muddy shoulder near the grass. There, tracks. Ramirez knelt again. Round cat prints. Fresh enough. 1 drag mark in spots behind the left rear pad. He grunted. Bobcat? Yes. Probably female. Maybe injured. He stood and looked down the ditch line. Could be denning nearby. Dana folded her arms against the wind. Then why stand in the road? Ramirez looked at the culvert, then at her. I don't know. He filed a note, called County Animal Control, and told Dana to avoid stopping alone if the bobcat reappeared. It was a responsible answer and absolutely not enough for the knot in her chest. The third morning, the bobcat was there before she rounded the bend. The sky was clear and pale, frost silver on the grass, and Dana saw the animal's silhouette against the shoulder as soon as her headlights swept the dip. It stepped into the lane and sat this time instead of standing, directly in front of the truck, tail tucked around its paws, ears forward, eyes fixed on the windshield. Dana whispered one word into the cold cab. Okay. She pulled the truck to a stop and reached for the county radio mic with one hand and her phone with the other. Route 7B to Annex. I am stopped at Miller's Bend with repeated wildlife obstruction. Possible emergency check requested. Same culvert location as yesterday. Notify sheriff. Tanya's voice crackled back immediately, lighter than usual now that Dana's concern had spread through the office. Copy, Dana. Earl already told us to keep a line open if that cat came back. The bobcat stood and moved to the culvert mouth on the right shoulder, then turned and looked directly at Dana again. Not fleeing. Waiting. Dana killed the engine. This time the sound was unmistakable. A thin, broken crying noise rose from inside the culvert pipe. High, panicked, and echoing. Not bird, not cat, human. Dana's blood turned to ice. Jesus! She was out of the truck before she finished thinking, boots sliding on gravel as she ran to the shoulder and dropped to one knee at the culvert mouth. Hey! Hey! Can you hear me? The crying came again, followed by a wet cough. A child. Dana flattened herself beside the pipe and angled her flashlight into the darkness. At first she saw only water trickling over silt and debris. Then the beam caught a small sneaker and a hand. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7, wedged 20 feet in where the pipe narrowed with drift debris and mud. He was half on his side, one leg pinned under storm branches, jacket soaked, face streaked with dirt, crying too hard to make words. Dana grabbed the radio mic with shaking fingers. Dispatch, child in the culvert at Miller's Bend, alive, pinned, send EMS, fire rescue, sheriff now. Her voice echoed off the road embankment and came back at her thinner and stranger. The bobcat stood 10 feet away in the grass, body low, eyes on the culvert opening. Dana turned just long enough to see it clearly in dawn light. Lean female, winter-thick coat dirty along one flank, left hind leg held stiff. It met her stare, then looked toward the ditch upstream and back again, pacing in short, agitated arcs. It's okay, Dana said to the child, because there was nothing else to say yet. I hear you. We got you. We got you. The next 20 minutes moved in the jerking, stretched-out way emergencies always do in memory. Too fast for thought and too slow for relief. Deputy Ramirez arrived first, tires spitting gravel, followed by volunteer fire rescue from Station 3 and the county medic unit. Ramirez took one look into the culvert and swore under his breath. That's the Thompson kid, he said. Eli, missing since yesterday evening. The name hit Dana like another blow. She remembered the bulletin Earl had mentioned in passing when she came in before dawn. A 7-year-old reported missing from a farmhouse half a mile away after wandering off during chores at dusk. Search teams had worked fields and tree lines through the night, but hadn't found him before visibility dropped. No one had checked inside the flooded culvert deeply enough because the water flow looked passable and there was no sign from the road, until a bobcat blocked a mail truck. Fire Rescue Captain Megan Doyle slid to the culvert mouth, in chest waders and a helmet, assessed the pinning, and started issuing orders in clipped bursts. We stabilize the road edge. Cut that brush. Get a small board and hand tools only. No power saws near the kid. Medic, warm blankets, and pediatric setup. Ramirez, traffic both directions now. Dana stayed low at the pipe opening, talking to Eli while the crew worked. His answers came in fragments between sobs. He had been chasing the barn dog when it ran toward the ditch. He slipped on the bank after dark. He crawled into the culvert because the wind was scary. Then water and debris shifted in the night and pinned his leg. He yelled until he lost his voice. He heard an animal outside at some point, but thought he was dreaming. Dana swallowed hard and kept her tone steady. "You did good, Eli. Keep looking at my light, okay? They're right here." Ramirez later said what amazed him most wasn't that Dana found the child. It was that the bobcat stayed through the beginning of the rescue. While firefighters worked and engines idled and radios crackled, the animal remained in the grass line above the culvert, pacing and stopping, watching the pipe. Twice it made the same harsh, rasping call Dana had heard on previous mornings. It didn't approach the responders, didn't bolt immediately at the noise, just hovered at the edge of the reeds like a frantic witness. Captain Doyle noticed it only when a volunteer pointed and whispered, "What in the world?" She glanced at Dana, then back to the bobcat, but there was no time to process. Eli was cold and pinned and getting more frightened by the minute. The extrication was delicate. The culvert was too narrow for a fully geared rescuer to reach the boy quickly without shifting the debris pile against his leg. Doyle sent in the slimmest firefighter on scene, 19-year-old Proby Nate Keene, strapped to a line and guided by voice and flashlight. Nate crawled on elbows through icy runoff, inching broken branches away by hand, while Megan coached from the opening. At one point, Eli started panicking and twisting, and Dana's voice became the only thing keeping him still. "Hey, Eli, listen to me. What's your dog's name?" "Rusty?" he cried. "Okay. When this is over, you can tell Rusty he owes us all breakfast. You hear me? He owes us pancakes. Big ones." Eli made a choking laugh that turned into a cough. Megan muttered, "Keep doing that," and Nate kept working. When the last branch came free and Eli's leg slid loose, a sound went up from everyone at the pipe mouth at once, half relief, half command. Nate secured the boy to a child board, and the team drew them out slowly, careful not to strike his head on the culvert edge. Eli emerged muddy, shaking, blue-lipped, and alive. Dana backed up as medics took over, and only then realized she was crying. She looked toward the grass line. The bobcat was gone. No one saw it leave. That part became part of the legend later. But in truth, everyone's eyes were on Eli as the medic wrapped him in heat blankets and started oxygen. By the time Dana thought to look, there was only bent grass and the pale gold of sunrise spreading over the ditch. Ramirez would find fresh tracks up the embankment later. One hind-foot drag mark clear in the mud, leading toward the cattails, and then disappearing into frozen field grass. Eli was transported to County General with hypothermia, dehydration, and a badly bruised leg, but no major fractures. The doctors said another few hours in that culvert, and the outcome could have been very different. His parents, Travis and Marie Thompson, came to the post annex 2 days later with a casserole dish nobody touched and tears they couldn't stop. Marie hugged Dana so hard Dana's glasses went crooked. Travis gripped her hand and said, voice broken, "They told us search teams passed that road twice. If you don't stop—" He couldn't finish. Dana told them the truth every time anyone tried to call her the hero. "It wasn't me first," she said. "That bobcat put me there." The county didn't quite know what to do with the story. Sheriff's office reports used clean language. Mail carrier reported repeated wildlife obstruction behavior at culvert location. Auditory check revealed missing juvenile. Coordinated rescue successful. Animal control reviewed the details and suggested the bobcat may have been denning near the ditch or responding to distress sounds. A wildlife biologist from the state office, when asked informally, said bobcats are highly attentive to unusual noises and can show repeated investigative behavior, especially if injured and defending territory, but he stopped well short of assigning intention. Dana didn't argue with any of it. She didn't need a theory as much as she needed the memory to stay clear. The animal in the road, the repeated look to the culvert, the refusal to leave until she stopped. Route 7B changed after that. County crews cleared debris from Miller's Bend, widened the shoulder, and installed a graded safety barrier across the culvert mouth that still allowed water flow but prevented crawl-in access. Earl added a standing note to carrier safety briefings. If something unusual repeats on your route, log it and report it. Pattern matters. Tanya at the annex printed a tiny bobcat silhouette and taped it above Dana's sorting case with the words, "Check the ditch," in black marker. Earl made her take it down during an inspection, then put it back himself after the inspectors left. As for the bobcat, Dana saw it one more time. 3 weeks later, same bend, same early light, but this time the road was clear. The bobcat stood on the far shoulder above the ditch in a patch of frost-white grass, watching as Dana's truck rolled past. It looked stronger, though the hind leg still carried a slight hitch. Dana slowed, but didn't stop. The animal didn't step into the lane. It just held her gaze for a second, then turned and slipped into the cattails. Dana drove on with tears in her eyes and laughed at herself for it. People in Pine Ridge still tell the story in different versions. Some say the bobcat flagged down the mail. Some say it saved the Thompson boy. Some insist it was all coincidence, and the cat was simply guarding a den nearby while the child happened to be trapped close enough to hear. Dana has heard every version and doesn't fight about any of them. She knows what she saw on 3 cold mornings in a row. A wild animal stood in her route and pointed, in the only way it could, toward a place no one was checking. It kept doing it until she stopped long enough to listen. Years later, when new carriers rode along with Dana on training days and asked why she always cut the engine at Miller's Bend for a second before crossing, she'd glance toward the culvert, now safer and cleaner than it used to be, and say the same thing every time. Out here, routine keeps you moving, but noticing is what keeps people alive.